last year that I will be the chair of education for the Pat Nixon Republican Women Federated, and so this is my last hurrah. I'm very excited to have brought this idea forth. It's a debate exhibition by my alma mater, Cal State Fullerton, but this year they upped the ante. I thought that maybe a Lincoln-Douglas style of debate would be proper, and guess what? They're going to be debating against debaters from Fullerton College, and I'm elated. I'm very happy. As one can see, there's a reception that's going to take place, and I have well over 100, almost 140 confirmed guests that are coming. Students. I have students from the historical high school of Fullerton High School, students from Fullerton College, not to mention California State University Fullerton. I have high school students and different students of different grades coming from as far away as Diamond Bar. So I'm really looking forward to meeting some people, meeting some new guests that hopefully will return to take a tour at this presidential library.
What is to be the subject of the debate?
This is going to be a very hot topic in more ways than one. It's concerning the first use of nuclear weapons. So that has been a topic that has been so important to the world, not only to this country, since before World War II. And it continues to be a topic now. We have an opening. The entire evening that will be set forth with a clip from President Nixon addressing this. So even though it comes from a different time frame, it is going to be very, very appropriate to today's world.
And what is the age of the debaters?
Well, we're talking about 19-20-year-olds that are already considered probably varsity. I have, about 21, 22 when you graduate, so, and one is looking to graduate this next coming year and hopefully going to law school. So they're about getting ready to leave the undergraduate world.
Okay, well, thank you, Caroline, and good luck on the debate.
Thank you very, very much for giving me this time. At this time, I'd like to bring up to the stage, would you please, welcome Mr. Carlos Solares from the university. Is he here? Mr. Solares? Oh, excuse me. Yes, here you are. Who will then bring up his colleague to begin this evening's exhibition.
Let's begin with introductions to Cal State Fullerton by Cindy Doe.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being able to make it tonight. My name is Cindy Doe, and I am currently a member of Cal State Fullerton's Forensics team. I've only been on the team for about a year now, but having this opportunity has truly changed my life. The Forensics team was a place where I found a community. But more importantly, it's a place where I know I have a voice and can make a difference. To outsiders, it may just seem like going to debates or writing speeches. But the forensics community is one that I value so deeply because I know I have a chance to make an impact on my community. Many conflicts currently taking place in contemporary American society are eroding the foundational values of our democracy, freedom, and liberty. Look out at the world today. Russia's war with Ukraine and the attendant risk of destabilizing Europe and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, as well as the war between Israel and Palestine, threatening to destabilize the Middle East. To resolve conflict, we must learn to communicate with each other, regardless of our differences, and be willing to challenge the societal norms in our everyday lives that hinder us from reaching our true potential as a society. Forensics provides the kind of training that encourages us to be these kinds of people that are willing to challenge the societal norms. As a member of the forensics community, I have the chance and the freedom and encouragement to speak up about whatever issues impact me and my community. However, it also comes with those who don't agree with us, and that's okay. Disagreement is okay. More importantly, disagreement is the sign of a healthy democratic republic. However, we must not let disappointment become something that hinders us from being able to communicate together and work as a community to better our society. Tonight, we hope to demonstrate that disagreement provides us a healthy opportunity to communicate together tonight as we discuss public policy and the US's implication on stabilizing the world. So, please join me today in welcoming Anise and Edward Urbina as they take the affirmative stance from Cal State Fullerton's Forensics team on the affirmative side, advocating in support from the US in being able to provide public policy on no first use of public policy. And let's also welcome Daniel Solares, who will be representing Fullerton College.
Welcome, esteemed guests, to the arena of rhetoric and reason. Our heartfelt appreciation extends to Cal State Fullerton for their cooperative behavior in tonight's debate. We'd also like to extend our gratitude to NOCCD trustee Ryan Bett, Vice President of Student Services Gilbert Contreras, and Jeanette Rodriguez, Academic Senate President and Chair of Communication Studies Department, for their esteemed presence and unwavering support of Fullerton College students at tonight's event. We're also immensely grateful to the Nixon President Museum and Library, Caroline Torres, Darlene Skye, and Pat Nixon Republican Women's Veteran Organization for the honor of this invitation to participate in tonight's event. Tonight, we celebrate the Fullerton College debate team's rich 60-plus years of forensics history, encompassing a dual emphasis on speech and debate tailored to our students' talents. Fullerton College proudly holds the title of the 2023 NFA Lincoln Douglas Championship Sweepstakes Champions. We're proud to showcase the intellectual work of debate tonight. I'm Daniel Solares, an English major serving as the treasurer of our club. My student journey from club member to debater has sharpened my insights, broadened my social circle, and clarified my aspiration to pursue law. I'm honored to present the debaters representing Fullerton College and subsequently delineate the impartial and equitable adjudication procedures for tonight's exhibition debate. First, let me introduce Alexa Palmer, the debate team captain and Speech and Debate Club president. With a passion for classical voice, Alexa's journey from novice to adept debater has not only honed her oratory skills, but also has enriched her vocal performances in music. Our second debater is Enzo Medeiros, a second-year psychology student intent on legal career. Enzo's dedication to the art of argumentation is inspired by Voltaire's speech, principles of upholding the right to free speech. Fullerton College will take position against the proposition of enacting the nuclear first-use policy. We thank you in advance for your attention and engagement in this critical discourse. Before we begin the debate, let me take a moment to explain the adjudication process. Tonight's debate will be decided by a panel of 7 judges, 2 student judges from each college, 2 professors, 1 from each college, and the honorable host of tonight's event, Caroline Torres, who debated for the legendary Lucy Keel. In accordance with criteria established by the National Speech and Debate Association, each adjudicator is equipped with a scoring card to assess the debate teams based on these specific categories: evidentiary support, reasoning, refutation, cross-examination skills, and delivery. The team that argues the highest cumulative score from all 7 judges in a particular category shall be deemed the victor of that category. The debate team that prevails in a minimum of 3 out of 5 categories will be declared the overall winner of the debate. I look forward to seeing you at the end after the results are tallied and announce the winner. Now, I will begin the debate by inviting Cal State Fullerton to speak for the affirmative case.
Good evening. In this perilous moment, the world faces significant threats. The conflict in Ukraine and the volatile situation in the Middle East, particularly the Israeli and Palestinian conflict, are causing profound destabilization. With nuclear-armed nations involved, there's a growing fear that the long-standing taboo against nuclear weapon use in place since World War II is eroding. In 2023, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists Doomsday Clock was moved forward to 90 seconds before midnight, signaling an unprecedented proximity to global catastrophe, primarily due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. As Americans, we hold a responsibility to leverage our influence and steer the world away from this existential threat. We propose that the United States must adopt a nuclear no-first-use policy to reinforce the global taboo against nuclear weapon use. Our stance is twofold. First, we argue that the rising threats, particularly from Russia and China, increase the risk of nuclear accidents and miscalculations. Potentially, this will lead to global annihilation. Secondly, a US-led NFU policy is crucial for revitalizing the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT, which is enhancing the US leadership in promoting global leadership and adherence to nuclear non-proliferation. The current US nuclear policy, characterized by strategic ambiguity, destabilizes the international prohibitions and taboos against nuclear weapon use. Darrell Kimball, director of the Arms Control Association, notes that the U.S. retains the first use of nuclear weapons, a stance that is lacking legal, moral, and military justification. This ambiguity increases the likelihood of a nuclear holocaust, as conflicts involving multiple nuclear powers could escalate uncontrollably. The advancements in nuclear-powered AI technologies, which are preemptive nuclear systems, further escalate and exacerbate the threat of nuclear war. Moreover, Russia's aggression in Ukraine raises alarms for non-nuclear nations who are committed to the non-proliferation of nuclear arms. Putin's nuclear saber-rattling, perceived as a deterrent against NATO, could embolden nations like North Korea and China to use nuclear weapons in a time of crisis. The situation is continually escalating, with Russia and China now prioritizing their own geostrategic interests over non-proliferation goals. Addressing crisis instability and proliferation is paramount. The U.S. is adopting a no-first-use policy, and this would mark a significant shift, bolstering its international standing and influence. The change is also vital in the context of the growing emphasis on low-yield nuclear tactical weapons, which are a real threat in conventional warfare, as we can currently see in the Ukraine and Russia conflict. A US-led no-first-use stance would rally global support for a renewed commitment to non-proliferation. In conclusion, a US-led international order underpinned by a no-first-use policy is not just about preventing conflict. It's also, and more importantly, about fostering global security, fostering economic prosperity, and a collaborative approach to the problems that truly face our world today. History has shown us the dire consequences of a destabilized international order. Our proposed shift towards a no-first-use policy is a step towards a safer and more stable world. Thank you.
Are you ready for cross-examination?
Ready.
If the affirmative is arguing that the U.S. should abandon its nuclear weapons program and move towards leadership for nuclear disarmament, are you arguing that the U.S. should abandon its nuclear weapons program and move towards leadership for nuclear disarmament?
We are not arguing for abandoning our nuclear weapons.
So the affirmative is not ethically opposed to the use of nuclear weapons for security?
We believe there should be an ethical and moral consideration when using nuclear weapons. However, we think that in our current environment, that might not be a sustainable path forward. So our goal is to move the needle forward towards some progress where we can use nuclear weapons as a last ultimate resort and not as a first use. So nuclear weapons should not be used to preemptively strike an enemy, and that is a policy that we are taking. We are not abandoning the use of nuclear weapons. They are to remain in our arsenal as a deterrent.
Okay. Why would a no-first-use policy reduce Russian aggression?
A nuclear no-first-use policy would reduce Russian aggression by increasing our U.S. hegemony, which means that it is our right, or it is our ability to lead the world and influence through soft power and not military power. So the reason that we want to push non-nuclear arms is to regain the standing that we have lost in our world, in our global society over the last couple of decades, over the last couple of years. That is the reason that we want to restore U.S. leadership as a form of moral superiority.
So does that strategic ambiguity mean the U.S. could greenlight a nuclear response if Russia used its tactical nuclear weapons on the non-nuclear Ukraine?
Our goal is not to create or start any conflicts. Our goal is to enhance global economic prosperity.
If the U.S. declares no first use,
That's time.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed judges and honorable opponents, today we address a topic of immense gravity, whether the United States federal government should enact a nuclear no-first-use policy. My teammate and I firmly stand against this proposition. First, ambiguity is a valuable tool for deterrence. While the affirmative argues that the ambiguity of the U.S. nuclear policy creates instability, we contend that strategic ambiguity is an essential tool for global security. Deterrence is not solely about a nation's ability, but also crucially about its perceived willingness to act. By keeping potential adversaries unsure about the circumstances under which the U.S. might employ nuclear weapons, we keep them cautious. A no-first-use policy removes strategic uncertainty, potentially emboldening adversaries like North Korea or Iran. Second, the current U.S. nuclear posture better ensures global stability. The affirmative cites concerns over Russia's actions in Ukraine. However, a no-first-use policy inadvertently signals to our adversaries that the U.S. is stepping back from its security commitments. Freedom House argues, the global order is nearing a tipping point, and if democracy's defenders do not work to help guarantee freedom for all people, the authoritarian model will prevail. Autocrats have been empowered by waning pressure from democracies. A world governed by an authoritarian order would in reality be one of disorder, replete with armed conflict, lawless violence, corruption, and economic volatility. The lesson of Putin's unprovoked, brutal invasion of the Ukraine must not be that the defenders of democracy weaken their resolve after authoritarians violate the rights of sovereign nations. Third, no first use is a counterproductive measure. While the affirmative paints a no-first-use policy as a moral and strategic imperative, we must consider its implications carefully. Let's turn our attention to the potential for regional adventurism. In terms of China and Taiwan, U.S. ambiguity has served as a deterrent against war. By explicitly stating nuclear weapons are off the table in a first strike scenario, we may inadvertently encourage China to consider actions it currently deems too risky. Such a move could have dire consequences for the sovereignty of Taiwan and regional region stability. By removing nuclear response from the equation, China may be tempted to test the resolve of the U.S. and its allies, potentially leading to a conventional conflict in the Asia-Pacific region, an outcome that would be catastrophic for global security and the Taiwanese people. Fourth, harm to U.S. global leadership. While the affirmative suggests that a no-first-use policy would enhance the U.S.'s global leadership, we argue the opposite. The U.S.'s nuclear umbrella has long provided assurance to its 30 global allies discouraging them from pursuing their own nuclear weapons. A shift in policy could erode trust in U.S. security guarantees. Instead of discouraging nuclear proliferation, allies may feel compelled to develop their own nuclear arsenals, believing that the U.S. will no longer serve as a credible nuclear deterrent against aggressive nuclear powers. According to David Transchenberg, former head policy staff of the House Armed Forces Committee, says, there is clear evidence in diplomatic channels that U.S. assurances that the nuclear umbrella has been and continues to be the single most important reason many allies have forsworn nuclear weapons. Such a signal could lead to an increase in nuclear weapon states such as South Korea, Japan, or Germany, which would undermine the very international order the affirmative wishes to stabilize. Fifth, the U.S. requires flexibility in modern warfare. The world is evolving, and so are the threats we face. From cyber threats to technological advances like AI in warfare, the U.S. must retain flexibility in its defense posture. Ambiguity is first and foremost strategic stability. A no first use policy would limit the U.S.'s ability to respond effectively to these new and diverse threats, tying its hands in an era of rapidly changing warfare. In conclusion, the essence of strategic ambiguity is its power to keep potential adversaries in check. While the concerns raised by the affirmative are genuinely worth deliberating, a nuclear no-first-use policy might inadvertently signal a retreat, emboldening these very forces. The stakes are high, and our approach to nuclear policy must be cautious, strategic, and rooted in the realities of global power dynamics. We therefore stand firmly against the proposition to enact a nuclear no-first-use policy. Thank you.
Is your position that nuclear annihilation and the threat of nuclear annihilation is the only way to keep our adversaries in check?
It's not the only way, but it's one of them, and the possibility is what's likely to deter these types of actions.
And how has strategic ambiguity currently de-escalated the conflicts in Ukraine or the conflicts in Palestine?
Well, currently, we have sent billions in aid, which has definitely helped the Ukraine.
Is the conflict over?
Not yet.
Has nuclear deterrence or strategic ambiguity, has that played a role in ending the conflict?
It has.
The conflict has ended?
No, I'm saying it is playing a role in the process of the ending that will come soon.
Okay. What assurances can we give to the adversaries that they will also, that they will not engage in first strikes against us?
Sorry, can you?
What assurances can we give our allies or ourselves that our adversaries will not strike us preemptively?
Well, aside from the aid that we've sent, with our strategic ambiguity policy, that makes it less likely that countries are willing to strike us.
So we're hinging all of this on it being less likely that we're going to face nuclear annihilation.
Yes, but less likely is better than not likely at all.
Less likely, and so that's what your policy is, so that less likely is better than?
Better than what?
So your policy is that nuclear strategic ambiguity is the only way forward?
Yes.
That's all.
I'd like to start off by thanking my opponents for raising the thoughtful concerns over the change in U.S. policy towards no first use that we are advocating for today. Over the next few minutes, I hope to explain why a no first use policy is preferable to nuclear ambiguity, and why such ambiguity puts us closer and closer to a doomsday scenario of all-out nuclear conflict that could result in a nuclear extinction. Ambiguity fails to deter nuclear conflict and only increases the risk of nuclear weapons accidents and miscalculations. Keeping nuclear weapons on a hair trigger have resulted in a number of very close calls from human error and system malfunctions. The threat of a first strike has not prevented nuclear proliferation. While our allies are comfortable under our nuclear umbrella, the countries that are not have continued to invest, whether publicly or secretly, in the development of nuclear weapons such as China, North Korea, and Iran. The very existence of nuclear weapons and their use as a part of jockeying for power in the international arena guarantee that nations will continue to believe that the only way to access power and leverage is through the development of nuclear weapons. Continued ambiguity by the U.S. encourages both nation-states and non-state actors that the only way to protect themselves and project power on the international stage is the development of nuclear weapons. Ambiguity as a strategic tool is nothing more than a threat to ensure the U.S.'s agenda internationally. However, that threat teaches other nations that the only way to negotiate in good faith with the U.S. is to also have nuclear weapons on a hair trigger to keep the U.S. in line. Strong U.S. leadership, for example, is exactly what's necessary to contain China. It is weak U.S. leadership in the status quo that has allowed China's influence to grow as our enemies align with China and Russia as a strategic defense against ambiguous U.S. nuclear policy. China and Russia's aggression can only be countered by strong U.S. leadership. Having nuclear weapons alone does not protect U.S. leadership. In the status quo, strategic ambiguity has not made the world safer. If it had, we wouldn't be having this debate. A no first use policy does not affect our ability to deter aggressive states. The threat of the U.S. full nuclear arsenal if anyone fires nukes at the continental U.S. is enough to deter others from first striking the nation. The only purpose in strategic ambiguity is to plant fear in other nations, yet our conventional military capabilities make us the most feared military nation in the world, which provides an effective deterrent against crossing the line with the United States. The negative's own arguments indicate that the current international world order is unstable, and the loss of U.S. leadership abroad has weakened the ability for the democracies to respond to growing threats. Our argument is that the ambiguity of first-use policy has exacerbated destabilization, and the U.S.'s refusal to be a leader on curtailing nuclear weapons and the threats of first strike have hurt its international standing. A no first use policy will be a significant move by the U.S. to take leadership stance that is modeled by other nuclear powers. Success on this front will strengthen international democracy and reduce threat levels. Think of it this way. Two people are involved in confrontation, both have guns raised and pointed at the other. Attempting to negotiate peace while pointing a gun at each other increases nervousness and fear, increasing the potential for an accidental firing of one of the weapons. The other two cannot negotiate in good faith with goodwill because they are each trying to hold the other hostage. If they put the guns down and walk away to have a conversation, they are each more likely to listen and work together for lasting peace while maintaining their access to guns as a means of protection, making both sides feel secure. If each side knows that the other side will not shoot first during the negotiation, then they can work together to resolve the conflict. Remember, the affirmative is not arguing that we should disarm all U.S. nuclear weapons, which is what much of the negative's argument could have to assume in order for them to win any significant disadvantages in the affirmative. We are not arguing for a drawdown of the U.S. nuclear arsenal. Maintaining our nuclear arsenal will allow us to maintain our nuclear deterrent capabilities while no first use can reduce the nuclear hair trigger, encouraging dialogue rather than annihilation.
How is U.S. leadership weak in the status quo?
I never said the U.S. was weak in the status quo.
No, so you're saying the U.S. is doing an effective job with the current strategy to ensure peace in the globe?
Well, I think some would say that the U.S. may look weak in our foreign policy due to the way our previous presidents from both parties have responded to certain conflicts, but we have continuously seen how the world has looked at us for help or how to resolve certain conflicts, so I don't think we're looked at as negative or as like weak in any way.
Yeah, but just to confirm, you're saying that today, with the current strategy in place, the U.S. is doing a good job at ensuring global stability. Is that correct?
In what way?
I'm just asking a question. Is that yes? It's a yes or no question. Are we doing a good job
But what, for what example exactly?
in ensuring that no nuclear war occurs, that there's a stable and diplomatic way of ensuring and resolving conflicts throughout the world? Is that?
But would you think by not having a no first use policy that would cause us to...
How about asking a different question? Do you have any concrete proof today that if the U.S. was to initiate such a policy that any other nations, namely our adversaries, would follow suit? Do you have any proof?
Well, that's the beauty about our nation is that we're one that actually starts and we lead rather than follow.
Okay. Well then, how can you reconcile the fact that China already has such a policy in place, but no adversaries, no allies, not Russia, not the U.S., not Israel, no other nation has followed suit? What's your response to that?
Well, I wouldn't say China is necessarily looked at as a leader, a hegemonic leader. We have influenced other nations and have historically followed the lead, which is one of the reasons why countries look at us rather than China.
But in the first speech, you cite that Russian and Chinese aggression is the main concern today for the instability in the globe. And the reason behind that is failing U.S. leadership. So how can you say China's not important in one moment, and before talk about how that's the very reason why we're having this conversation?
Well, I would say that, U.S. is one of the big countries alongside Russia and China, and I think we're looking to each other in regards to, we're really close to having a third world war depending on how we,
Sure.
how we handle conflict, which is
Yeah.
one of the reasons why we're affirming with the no first use policy today.
That's time. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. Friends and colleagues, consider the international arena as a grand chessboard where each nation is a player, carefully deliberating every move. In chess, the power of the game lies not in the use of a single piece, but in the potential moves that piece could make. Just as a chess player uses the queen's power implicitly, maintaining options without committing to a single strategy, so too does strategic ambiguity act in the realm of nuclear deterrence. It keeps opponents on their toes, unsure of the response their actions might provoke. Removing the queen from the board, akin to declaring a no first use policy, simplifies the game for the opponent. Ambiguity is a calculated display of power, not a reckless threat, and it serves as an invaluable deterrent by maintaining a spectrum of response options, preventing adversary aggression and assuring allies. The affirmative argues a hair trigger alert increases the risk of nuclear accident and miscalculation. However, modern safety measures reduce the risk of accidents to near impossibility. Adam Lothar, Vice President of Research at the National Institute for Deterrence Study, and Derek Williams, a B-52 weapons system officer, argue, while the military strives for perfection, everything from the weapons themselves to the crew that maintain and operates them, are designed to mitigate error. This is done through the safety measures built into the weapons, training of the crews, the personal reliability assurance program, the operational procedures, a command and control system comprised of layers specifically designed to prevent accidental war. Furthermore, ambiguity does not equate to recklessness. On the contrary, it reinforces the cautionary principle that any aggressive action could incur an unpredictable and possibly extreme response, thereby preserving peace through strength. The notion that our first strike capability prompts nations like China, North Korea, and Iran to pursue nuclear programs is an oversimplification of the global nuclear proliferation. These nations' ambitions precede the policy of ambiguity and are driven by regional dominance and ideological assertions, not merely by our nuclear posture. According to William Chambers, Assistant Chief of Staff for Strategic Deterrence and Nuclear Integration, no first use cannot be expected to have a significant impact on the risk of miscalculation in crisis. There are far more fundamental factors involved than the effect of a single policy that can be changed in an instant. I'm talking each presidential administration can change it. The historical record is mixed at best regarding the effect of declaratory policy. A host of factors affects a nation-state's decisions and behaviors, one of which is the state's determination of its own self-interest. In fact, our ambiguous stance provides a counterbalance to such aspirations, signaling that their aggressive moves could be met with an overwhelming force, thus encouraging diplomacy over military solutions. The affirmative asserts that a second strike capability suffices for deterrence, yet this overlooks the complexity of deterrence theory. Deterrence is not only about retaliation, it is about preventing aggression in the first place. It's a nuanced interplay of perception and fear. Our opponents must believe that we can respond in kind to any form of aggression, not just nuclear. This broad deterrence spectrum is crucial given the very threats we face today. Contrary to the affirmative's claim, strategic ambiguity has not diminished U.S. leadership. Instead, it has underscored our commitments to protecting our allies under nuclear umbrella. Removing the first use policy could harm the leadership we are currently rebuilding by encouraging allies to develop their own nuclear capabilities. Our resolve is what reassures our allies, not the promise of restraint in the face of existential threats. Moreover, the affirmative's expectation that other nuclear states would follow suit with the no first use policy is optimistic at best. The affirmative concedes that the current international order is unstable and that democracies must respond to growing threats from authoritarian regimes. Nothing suggests that rival powers would model their policies after ours, especially when Russia, North Korea, and Iran could stand to gain strategic advantages by maintaining their own ambiguity. Let's be clear. No first use does not automatically translate to diplomacy. It can signal weakness, inviting adversaries to exploit conventional military avenues of aggression with less fear of nuclear reprisal. In the case of China in respect to Taiwan, our flexibility in response is not only a necessity for modern warfare, but a cornerstone of maintaining strategic stability. In conclusion, the affirmative's argument for no first use does not hold up against the multidimensional chess game that is international security. As the U.S. considers its next move, let's remember that the strength of our position on the global chessboard is not only in the pieces we move, but also in the potential moves our adversaries must consider. Thank you. I'm open for applause.
Are you ready for cross? Wouldn't we be reducing aggression by having a no first use policy?
No, as I explained with China, they did the same policy and has not reduced aggression. No country has followed suit. If anything, having the policy is what reduces aggression.
Okay. And do you think China has the same level of power as the U.S.?
I think you cite them as a global power. Yes, they're considerable. They're just like the U.S. in some ways. Yes.
How does strategic ambiguity prevent nuclear proliferation amongst our adversaries?
We have other ways. Iran is currently pursuing nuclear programs, and we use sanctions as a way of preventing a nuclear proliferation in their case. We're not going to nuke someone for proliferating. That doesn't make sense. That would cause a nuclear war.
Mm-hmm. And why would diplomacy ever work out with allies if we were holding the threat of nuclear annihilation over their heads?
In the status quo, we have global order. Our allies listen to us, we listen to them, we communicate, and we have this supposed, as you would say, threat of annihilation over their heads. So I don't understand your question.
So, okay. What is the incentive for them to negotiate in good faith?
The who?
The bully, or whatever that would mean in your head.
The boy is in who's the boy?
Like Russia? Not boy.
Oh, no, boy. So you're saying Russia's a boy. Well, I would prefer we take diplomatic dialogues before an actual war. You know, I think that's one incentive to why countries might want to pursue diplomacy before war. Does that make sense?
When do we say that we're promoting war in our...
Well, you're saying
case?
Why would we pursue diplomacy with the boy that's Russia? I just told you to avoid war.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Sure, thank you.
the United States must adopt a nuclear no-first-use policy to prevent crisis escalation and promote international stability. As Gareth Evans, chair of the Asia-Pacific Leadership Network, highlights, a first-use nuclear option increases crisis instability, risking catastrophic miscalculations. This crucial risk, ignored by the negative team, could lead to unwarranted preemptive strikes. The negative team's reliance on checks and balances fails to address the real danger of a crisis of a miscalculation during a crisis. Historical lessons, particularly from World Wars I and II, demonstrate how quickly miscalculations can escalate into global conflicts, especially now that we're in a nuclear-armed world. History teaches us that the international conflicts often sparked by these same miscalculations can spiral into global crises. In a nuclear age, the risk is exponentially higher. We cannot afford to ignore these lessons. Adopting a nuclear no-first-use policy doesn't weaken our nuclear deterrent. Instead, it mitigates the risk of catastrophic miscalculations. This policy change allows for effective diplomacy, removing the immediate threat of nuclear annihilation from international negotiations. The negative's view that nuclear proliferation is irreversible misses the point. A US-led nuclear no-first-use policy sets a global standard, creating a taboo against first use and promoting a coalition against any nation that breaks that norm. This strategic move is essential for guiding the world towards greater peace and stability. Contrary to the negative's claims, first strike capability is not the linchpin of deterrence. Our unmatched conventional strength, coupled with a nuclear no-first-use policy, provides our allies with confidence and enables us to engage adversaries in meaningful diplomacy without the looming threat of nuclear war. Our opponent says that we are to deliver restraint to our allies, or resolve, not restraint to our allies, and that is exactly what we do. We reiterate and reaffirm our resolve to our allies. We use our military and our economic and our international influence to promote peace and prosperity. International politics is indeed a strategic game, but a game where one player is constantly threatening to smash the chessboard. It's not really a game. A nuclear no-first-use policy demonstrates that restraint and wisdom needed from a global leader ensuring a more stable and peaceful world order. Thank you.
Strategic ambiguity operates as a critical component of U.S. foreign policy, affording the U.S. the ability to tailor its responses to the nuances of each individual international incident. It creates room for a spectrum of responses, from peaceful diplomacy to military might, depending on the scenario's demands. Strategic ambiguity acts as a deterrent to potential aggressors. Deterrence is not solely about a nation's ability, but also crucially about its perceived willingness to act. In the context of Taiwan, ambiguity ensures China remains cautious, unable to predict how the United States might react to a move against Taiwan. The veiled nature of the U.S. position serves as a check against Beijing's stated one China policy ambitions, preserving stability in the Asian-Pacific region. While a no-first-use policy would inadvertently signal to our adversaries that the U.S. is stepping back from its security commitments, ambiguity reassures allies of America's commitment to their defense. Allies under the U.S. nuclear umbrella trust in the flexible and dynamic protection it offers, dissuading them from feeling the need to develop their own nuclear weapons, and of reflecting a U.S. commitment to the democratic leadership. Moreover, a premise that a no-first-use policy would set a standard for others is tenuous. Aggressive nations such as Russia, which operates under ambiguity and has expansionist tendencies, will likely interpret NFU as an operational weakness to be exploited rather than a responsible norm to adopt. The idea that competitors and potential adversaries like North Korea would follow the U.S. is contradicted by their history of disregarding international norms to further their strategic goals. NFU would provide them with opportunity rather than restraint. Suppose we play along for a moment with the affirmatives metaphor. William Chambers, an expert in deterrence, argued, no pursuit is unlikely to cause other countries to set their nuclear gun down. Each nation pursues its own interests, and U.S. policy will not instantly change those interests. The game of international security is not a standoff at high noon where the good guy with a gun can just set it down and encourage a chat by the campfire. International security is more like a grand chessboard, where foresight, flexibility, and the wits to keep one's opponents guessing rules supreme. Strategic ambiguity is the queen on the board. Her ability to move in all directions keeps adversaries perpetually off balance, allies confidently secure, and the dominoes of proliferation steadfastly upright. The value of strategic ambiguity lies not in a single predetermined move, but in the vast array of possibilities it presents, keeping the United States always one step ahead in the strategies of global statecraft.
Let's think about the future for a moment. We have to learn how to negotiate and resolve our conflicts without the threat of weapons of mass destruction. Maintaining the U.S. on a nuclear hair-trigger stance increases the risk of miscalculation during a military crisis, leading to preemptive first strikes as nations fear the power of the U.S. nuclear arsenal and the ambiguity of whether the U.S. will first strike their nation to win a conflict. That ambiguity puts us in a course for a dangerous game of chicken. One nuclear attack could set off a global nuclear conflict that could ensure our extinction well. The negative argues that it is the possibility of being faced with the overwhelming force of our nuclear weapons as a reason our adversaries remain in line. Yet, it is exactly that stance that has encouraged the nuclear proliferation of our adversaries like North Korea, China, and Pakistan. It ensures that as countries develop economic success, they will feel the need to obtain nuclear weapons as a means of jockeying for position in an international community where having nuclear weapons is the ultimate sign of power. If the status quo continues, every nation in the world will eventually develop nuclear weapons, making a nuclear winter from nuclear war inevitable in the future. Notice that the experts that the negative sides are simply speaking from the U.S. strategic interest. They represent domestic organizations designed to support the United States, like Adam Lowther from the National Institution of Deterrent Studies or William Chambers from the Strategic Deterrence and Nuclear Integration Organization. Such evidence can only be biased by a commitment to U.S. strategic interests. We have referred to evidence from international and domestic organizations to support a more balanced view of contemporary international politics, like the Board of Atomic Scientists and International Organization, or the chair of the Asia-Pacific Leadership Network for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament. There is clear international support for no first use policies. The U.S. no first use policy will strengthen the taboo against the U.S. of nuclear weapons. Relinquishing our strategy of ambiguity can significantly impact our international standing. Renewing our credibility and power to sway the international community towards our democratic ideals. It will provide us with the power and support to isolate our enemies while maintaining avenues of open dialogue and diplomacy with our adversaries without the risk of miscalculation leading to a nuclear conflict. We are not advocating disarmament, which is really what the negatives arguing are targeting at. Maintaining the U.S. nuclear arsenal is enough to sustain our deterrence strategy. Like my partner said, no one is going to forget that we have a nuclear arsenal and the best military in the world, which will maintain our ability to deter aggression from our adversaries. But the difficulties that the world face won't be solved by deterrence. It will be solved by our ability to work together and work with others, regardless if they're our friends or not. No first use is a gesture that assures our allies that the U.S. is an honest broker with the world's interests at heart, while assuring our adversaries that we are willing to negotiate in good faith. The question this audience must ask at the end of this debate is whether or not we are safer in a world with out-of-control proliferation of nuclear weapons. We hope you decide that the risk of nuclear annihilation necessitates that cooler heads prevail and we preemptive first strikes off the table, especially in a crisis of instability. We cannot use our nuclear weapons to hold the world hostage and then be surprised when it doesn't make us any safer. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, to reiterate the next position, we have considered the merits of the Act's argument and side against a nuclear no first use policy. Both sides agree that the current global political order is in a time of crisis, and so it is simply not the time to completely revamp our deterrence strategy, no matter the merits of the case. Doing so would only work to upend the progress we have made in the last 70 years. Somewhere. Yes. By the grace of debate. The Act's plan is essentially declaratory policy, which to the international community is tantamount to a hopeful promise. That's like a pinky promise, guys. That's not material. The thing is that these promises only ensure to embolden our adversaries. A promise like this takes the nuclear option off the table, telling our enemies, go ahead, expand, invade, do what you want. That is our promise to you. It only emboldens the enemy, ensuring that we go to a nuclear war, the very thing the AF is trying to prevent. This is tantamount to essentially giving a Sharpie to a child that's unsupervised and hoping that they don't write on the walls. Sure, you can hope, sure, you can pray, but the reality is, he's a kid, he has his nature. You're asking China to go against nature. You're asking China not to take Taiwan. That kid is gonna write on that wall. China is gonna invade Taiwan unless we deter them, unless you tell the kid, if you write on the wall, I'm gonna put you in the corner. We're deterring, that's an act of deterrence. As a parent, you need options. And so, again, additionally, the global order is a shifting landscape. It's not a fixed law situation. This isn't duct tape we're talking about. These are complex things. You can't just use one option and that solves every crisis. It requires flexibility, like a chess game. It's not just the pieces you have and the options you have, but also the risks and the options that the enemy must anticipate. What will you do? That's the question they must answer and must keep answering. That's the point. Keep them on their toes. If you just say, hey, there's one option to everything, then they can expect that and they can work around it. The U.S. requires flexibility in the situation to be able to tailor our responses to a crisis. And so strategic ambiguity gives us that flexibility. It tells us, hey, nukes are an option, but they're not the only option. The act seems to think that strategic ambiguity means that we're going to nuke everybody. We haven't nuked anyone. The world is fine now. We maintain stability. We work with our allies. We work with our enemies. We haven't nuked Russia when they invaded Ukraine, so we're not going to do so. Flexibility is what is the name of the game here, guys, and flexibility is what we continue to maintain. The AF is already to take away that flexibility, to take away the promise of assurance, and to work to hopefully hope that the universe will be nice to each other, which as the last hundreds of years show, that's not necessarily true. And so again, to just kind of go in conclusion here, flexibility is key to global stability and key to ensuring that the world does not upend itself. And so that is what strategic ambiguity does, not the nuclear no first use. Thank you.
associate professor in the Department of Human Communication Studies at Cal State Fullerton and also the co-director of the forensics program. And in addition to wanting to congratulate all 4 of these debaters, just one more time, let's give them They did a wonderful job. And we are going to give our judges here in the first row a few minutes to think about their decision and circle it. We have the results, so I reintroduce Dennis Lars, who will present them.
Thank you for your attentive presence. Wait, is this on? You guys can hear me, right? Well, down? Yeah. I'm a bit short, I'm sorry. Thank you for your attentive presence. Our 7 judges has assessed both teams based on the 5 categories provided by the National Speech and Debate Association. Those categories were: 1, evidentiary support, how well arguments were backed by data; 2, reasoning, logic applied to arguments; 3, refutation, effectiveness in countering points; 4, cross-examination skills, ability to question and clarify; and 5, delivery, the presentation of arguments. To win the debate, a team must win the highest score in 3 out of 5 categories. As we approach the moment of decision, let's first offer a round of applause for the hard work and dedication displayed by these talented undergraduate students throughout the debate. We're deeply grateful to the judges for their fair evaluation, and to you, the audience. Let's give yourself a round of applause, too. Now we turn to the judges for their verdict. In the category of cross-ex, the team with the highest score was Cal State Fullerton. In the category of reasoning, the team with the highest score was Fullerton College. If Fullerton wins this final second to last argument, they win the entire debate. In the category of refutation, the team with the highest score was, drumroll please, Fullerton College. However, let's give them both a round of applause. Congratulations to both teams. Now I'll hand over the mic to Caroline Torres.
As a judge, this isn't the first time that I've performed as a judge. It's been a long time since I was a judge. And when I looked at the categories, quite honestly, I had to do some research when I got home the other night, and I went up to my library and I said, oh my God, here's my books. Believe it or not, I still have my books. I still have my texts. And much of that information is still current. So this is a study in forensics that hasn't changed. Perhaps the delivery has changed, yes, all right? And perhaps some of the formats are a little bit different. I was talking to a colleague of mine here, and I remember when I went into Lincoln-Douglas debate my senior year at the university. It just so happened that I was glad to get rid of my partner at that time. However, there was a large tournament at SC, and I noticed that I was the only girl around. I was very, very, very shy, and here comes some strapping, good-looking gentlemen, and in suits, and we used to have a joke, in those days, we would have 4x3 cards, and so we would put them in these containers and drag them around in our dollies, like a bunch of dead bodies, because you're not going to go through every card and present it to the judge if they wanted to as evidence. But I went in, long story short, I beat SC and I beat UCLA. And it took us into the quarterfinals. I'm very proud of that, thank you. I don't remember what the topic was. I just remembered that we had to stay. At any rate, I would like to congratulate you all. I'm very impressed with the fact that you are able to maintain your thought and your premises. And I will tell you something about your 37th president. When he was a debater and people asked him about his debating experience, he was to credit his interest or success in debate back to the colorful conversations he had with his father. His father was a very argumentative man. He was not formally educated. He had quit school at 6th grade, but he loved argumentation and, as Richard Nixon stated, disputation. His father would drive him to tournaments and would sit in the back of the room, and then on the way home would analyze all of Richard's arguments. Isn't that incredible? And he was to credit his debating experience to much of his stances in politics. He was to credit his education later on to this incredible discipline of the mind, as my former professor, Dr. Lucy Keel, told me. Yes, Caroline, it is a discipline of the mind. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have never seen this library, Darlene Skye, I know Mr. Vic Dennis out there and a few other docents, invite you to come back. I invite you to come back, to come and go through the birth house and look at that little round table with the mismatched chairs. That was a start, and where it all began for Richard Milhouse Nixon. Ladies and gentlemen, this comes to the end of our event tonight. Thank you for having come. Drive carefully. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.